Before I begin, I want to thank you for inviting me here today, and very special thanks to the Fourth Universalist staff, to your music director, Robert, and to my worship assistant, Deborah, who will give me the elbow if I'm not where I'm supposed to be at the right time. She promised to do that for me. When I was in high school, a friend invited me to join her at her weekly youth group gathering at a local church. I grew up in Connecticut, and what was then known as Congregationalist Church in town, now the United Church of Christ, was quite typical of what you would expect in New England, white clapboard with a tall steeple that could be seen from any direction. The church was very much a town landmark, but I had never been inside. I grew up unchurched. My mother had been raised Episcopal, and my father was a secular and cultural Jew. In Connecticut in the 1960s and 70s, unlike in some other parts of the country, church attendance was not expected. In fact, growing up, I don't remember any of my peers talking much about being part of a faith community. So when my friend invited me to join her for her church event, I was surprised, perhaps a little intrigued, and more than willing to join her. I remember very little about the activities of the evening, but two things have stayed with me over time. First, this group of friends, many of whom were from neighboring towns, seemed to have a relationship that was based on a different set of criteria than what I was used to at my local high school. There was little or no interest in the topics that dominated discussion among my school friends: grades, sports, God forbid, cheerleading, who was dating whom, or current fashion. In my memory, there was no gossip and there was no meanness. The camaraderie seemed genuine and, most of all, kind. Second, I remember especially that the kids were very at home in the church building. At one point, we went into the sanctuary to meet with someone who I now think must have been the youth minister or youth advisor. He was a hippie, or appeared to be one to me at the time, and my companions clearly adored him. I remember the easy relationship that he had with the kids, and I remember being enchanted by how comfortable everyone felt in the church building, even to the point of lounging in the pews. Up to then, my experience in a church sanctuary had been sitting up straight while wearing white gloves and a hat on Easter Sunday and Christmas in the rather stuffy Episcopal church that my mother preferred. In my years of working with newcomers to Unitarian Universalism, I have found that the concept that most often confuses people is non-creedal religion. The principles and the shared values that replaced them a couple of years ago are lovely and garner enthusiastic responses, but to many newcomers, they don't provide a satisfactory guiding mysticism that they crave. Sometimes because, like me, they come from secular, unchurched families and feel as though something in their upbringing was missing, or because past religious experiences don't speak to their spiritual needs. Many of the folks who visit our congregations are searching for expansive ideas of God and how to fit an amorphous and changing concept of God into their lives. Truth be told, we don't often succeed in feeding that need. So, when questions come up, I turned to the Unitarian Universalist theologian James Luther Adams and his 1976 essay, The Five Smooth Stones of Liberalism. Adam uses the biblical story of David and Goliath as a metaphor for liberal faith. You probably remember the story. I'm pretty sure they made it into a cartoon at some point. The shepherd boy David volunteers to battle the Philistine warrior Goliath. The Israelite king Saul offers David his armor, shield, and sword, but David throws it off and instead collects 5 smooth stones from the river. He loads one of the stones into his simple sling, aims, and fells the giant warrior with one shot to the forehead, the only place where he is unprotected. The standard Judeo-Christian lesson from the story goes something like this: With courage and cleverness, and of course with God on one side, anyone, even a teenager or a lowly shepherd, can overcome the forces of evil. But Adams provides us with another interpretation. David throws off King Saul's armor. Its heaviness weighs him down. He is unable to maneuver under its weight. The armor represents a faith without the freedom to move. After all, even Goliath's armor failed to protect him. Faith, in Adam's view and mine, should feel light. It should allow and encourage intellectual and spiritual transformation, one of our new shared values, by the way. Without the burden of armor, shield, and sword, David is free to do God's work. In Adam's essay, each of the 5 smooth stones in the biblical story represent a different feature of liberal faith. I used this essay to teach a biannual Pathways to Membership class at the Brooklyn congregation. Each stone is different and together holistically define liberal religion. But the first speaks to me more than others, as in my opinion, it brings our non-creedal faith into clearer focus. In Adam's words, quote, "Religious liberalism depends first on the principle that revelation is continuous. Meaning has not been finally captured, nothing is complete, and thus nothing is exempt from criticism. Liberalism itself, as an actuality, is patient of this reality. Events of word, deed, and nature are not sealed. They point always beyond themselves." End of quote. We are free, therefore, to evolve our beliefs throughout our lives as we gather new information, be it from personal experience, the arts, science, or inspiration. Belief in God, goddess, gods, maybe God, or no God is transient. Most importantly, you don't have to choose. You don't have to choose. Your only commitment is to be open to the journey and willing to walk side by side with those whose experience is different from yours. I didn't realize it at the time, but the experience I had at the White Clapboard Church in Westport, Connecticut 50 years ago was a seminal moment in my spiritual journey. For the first time, I was exposed to congregational life as it is meant to be: kind, welcoming, non-judgmental. I can recall only a handful of specific events from my youth, but that one evening came back to me in full color many years later when I joined my congregation in Brooklyn. I sensed then that I had been denied something important, something needed, but was unfulfilled until I found it in Unitarian Universalism many years after my first experience at the Congregational Church in Westport. And now, you'll have a chance to think about what revelations have brought you to this moment, at this time, in this congregation. Each of you should have a blank piece of paper, and at least, it wasn't a mistake in your order of service. You should actually have it, it's in there. At least one writing implement. If you're joining us on Zoom, now is the time to gather these materials. You're going to draw a timeline, and Deb has my example, my timeline, my personal timeline. I did it last night. This is the timeline of your spiritual life. Here's an example. On the timeline, you're going to mark 5 years. So you're going to draw a line across the middle of the piece of paper. You're going to mark 5 years. That's the earliest time when most of us have clear memories. 15 years, that's the time when most of us are obnoxious. 25 years, which is 25 years, so early adulthood. Halfway to your current age. I'm 67, so that for me that would be 33 and a half. And your current age. Obviously, if you're 25 years or younger, you'll stop there. So what you're going to do, you're going to think about how you thought about God at each of these ages. You can use the James Luther Adams definition that Deb read earlier, or the definition that made sense to you at the time. You can use words or pictures or symbols, whatever works for you. Between these reflections, write or think or draw the experiences or revelations that caused you to change your image of God over time. Revelation comes in all forms, from the most mundane, an invitation from a friend to join a church youth group, to the most transient, a scientific discovery, a pilgrimage to a sacred site, the death of a loved one, or the birth of a child. Nothing is off the table. We'll take a few minutes to complete our timelines, and I will keep time, and I think Michael will give us a little background music. So take your time. I'm sure most of you have much more to write, so this job is never done. The timelines that you created for yourself this morning are only a tiny illustration of the infinite number of inputs that reveal your truth as you understand it at this time and in this place. The journey is never over. As long as there is breath, there is revelation.